to Cyrus Webb Presents. Excited for you guys to join us for today's broadcast. Both for those who are tuning in on our online affiliates, we appreciate you. We're about to bring in our Amazon Live side as well of our program for today's guest. We're excited to welcome Hema and Michael Crockett to our program today. They're the co-authors of the new book, The Everyday Leader. You all see it there. We're going to talk to them not only about the idea of leadership, but also about how all of us can be more effective and how it can really permeate all areas of our lives. If you guys are just now hearing about the book, of course, we'll let you know how to get your own copy of it and stay connected with them. Going to go ahead and connect in with our Amazon Live side and begin that side of the broadcast. Waiting is always the worst part. There they are. They finally gave me permission. And we are live on Amazon Live for today's broadcast with two great guests with a great topic that I think all of us can learn from. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, joining you guys on the Amazon Live platform. I want to remind you guys, if you're not doing so already, make sure you guys give us a follow. The follow button is now below us there. You will also see the book for today's guest. We're excited to welcome Hema and Michael Crockett to our program. They're the co-authors of this book you guys see here, The Everyday Leader. We're going to talk to them not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's been like for them to talk about the idea of leadership, the things that all of us can learn from it, and what they hope you as the reader take away from it as well. Hema, Michael, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. We're super excited about today.
Well, look, the pleasure is definitely all mine. Michael, I'm going to start with you on this because we get to know a lot about your background in the book as we're reading The Everyday Leader. What was it like for you to reflect on your own life and training and how it applies in other aspects of your life?
It was definitely a reflection moment where I realized, like, I knew when I was writing the book or immediately after some of the stories, when those actually happened in the book, like I knew I reflected a little bit then, but writing the book gave me a lot more time to, wow, I could have completely performed so much better if I did this. If I only knew what I know now back then, I would have been so much better of a leader. So that's really, as I was writing the book, especially those stories that kind of capture the negative side of a trait, that's definitely where that self-reflection and it kind of came from.
And Hema, you and I've had another great conversation, and the idea of leadership definitely came up. What has that been like for you, Hema, to as this book was kind of coming together, to think about the broader message about leadership and how these qualities you guys outlined in The Everyday Leader can apply to everyone?
Yeah, so I think a great place to start the answer to that question really stems from why we wrote the book. And early pandemic last year, we started talking just about leadership. We were getting a lot of questions from clients and prospects saying they needed leadership coaching or they needed some type of training for their leaders who are now leading in a remote environment. And that started the conversation for us around how leadership is taught in the military and in the Marine Corps specifically, since that's the experience we're diving into here, right out of boot camp. So you're not managing people, you're not leading people, you're not doing any of those things, but you're really taught how to show up as a leader. And for me, what was really nice about that conversation was the understanding and I think the realization that in corporate America and in business, we tend to think about leadership after somebody's reached a certain level, title, or role, or are high potential or on a promotion track. We don't necessarily think about it right out of the gate from day one. So it was really nice for me to think about leadership in this broader context and how anybody can show up as a leader, whether you're managing people or just really managing and leading yourself, truthfully.
And that's one of the things that struck me in reading The Everyday Leader. And I think that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation because, I think for those of us who bring our best to what we do, right, our goal is to be better. One of the things you all talk about when it comes to a decisive leader, the importance of moving forward. But there is a realization, too, that not all leaders are good. Right. Not also not it, and that may be hard for some of us to comprehend that. Okay, you don't want to give your best. You don't want to set the best example. So, Michael, what was that like for you to think of what your training had prepared you for, but also countering that with what we don't want to be as leaders?
I think I didn't really see it early on, probably for my first 8 to 10 years. I really didn't see necessarily bad leadership. It was really as I started to open my eyes and I started to be exposed more to how things more so how things worked in the Marine Corps and definitely in different units, that I started to experience, oh, that's where the flip side of that trait comes from. Oh, okay. Well, let me put that in my toolbox in my memory bank, like, because I never want to feel like that again. I don't want to ever have my Marines, the people that work for me, feel like I feel working for that person. So that's really where some of the where I felt.
And Hema, to bring you in on this, talking about being decisive, there's an interesting example you give, a real life example with your father and going to get a car. And I thought that was such an interesting story because I think we all can relate to that, right? We say, okay, we're going to do this, and we do our due diligence, we do all the things, and yet we still haven't done that thing. Talk to us about that, Hema, and what it was like you to reflect on that real world example in the topic and conversation about being decisive as a leader.
Yeah, I think as leaders, what we want to do, and just as people, is we want to make the right decision, right? We don't want to let anybody else down, whether that's at work, whether that's our family, whether that's ourselves. And so sometimes we tend to go back and forth on, should I do this? Should I not do this? How should I do it? How should I not do it? And I think we see this in real world examples all the time. And honestly, my dad buying that car was a prime example of it. I mean, he had done so much research and he was ready for it. And honestly, I think where we end up is sometimes in this analysis paralysis because we want to make the right decision. And we need to realize that there's no such thing as the right decision or the perfect decision. We have to make the best decision with the information we have available to us at that time. The good news is, I mean, when you're buying a car, such as my dad was, it's not a life or death situation here. We're not, trying to boil the ocean or go for world peace or anything like that. So if he purchased a car, realized a little while later he didn't like it, you can always reverse that decision and sell it and buy a new car. So it's just important, I think, as people for us to understand that even our inaction or our lack of decisiveness actually does send a message. And I can't tell you how many conversations we had with my dad about this car. It was actually kind of funny after a while. So he did end up buying it, to be fair.
But it just goes to show, Michael, how these qualities, they really do kind of seep into everything. And I thought about when I got to the part in the book about tact, talking about that, how, yes, it's so important at work, but definitely in the home, the way that we communicate with each other, with our friends, where I've been told that's something I need to maybe do some tweaking on. But it's one of those things that really does. So what has that conversation been like for you, Michael, now that the book is out and you're having conversations like this to show people that, yes, you're talking about leadership, and that's something that can apply and does apply to your job or your profession, but it also can just apply to who you are as an individual.
Right. So I'll be the first one to admit that it's probably tact and bearing were the two traits that kind of I struggle with the most. Tact, because sometimes in the heat of the moment, my emotions and my passion for the Marine Corps or doing the right thing or just the job in general has a tendency to come out in a more aggressive than I would like tone, and that can come across as almost as angry or not the intent that I want. And what I've learned since retiring out of the Marine Corps is that I take a step back and I really think about the words I'm going to use and think about the tone and my facial expressions and all of it, because I want to make sure that my intent is received positively by those around me, especially at home. That's yes.
And him, to carry on with that thought, I mean, in the work that you're doing as well, what has that been like for you to see how how, again, those examples that are taught, like in the military, can have these real world applications for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that comes to mind, and Mike actually touched upon this, is really around it can be a little bit easier for us sometimes to be tactful or compose ourselves in a work setting. And sometimes at home or in our professional setting, we let our emotions get the best of us. And I think that happens because we let our guard down, right? We think that we are in, or we have these close relationships, and perhaps we don't have to be as tactful or as respectful in those relationships because the other person will love us or be in our life no matter what. And the truth is that when stress levels tend to go up, and we found this in our work as well, that when stress levels tend to go up, tact tends to go out the door, whether that's in a professional setting or in a personal setting. And what we're really starting to find from a client perspective and really in that professional setting is that over the last 18 months or 2 years, especially with COVID, that the work stress and the personal stress have all kind of joined together and just created a snowball effect. And it's been pretty easy to kind of lose our composure or I would say lose our tact in a lot of moments. And I think it's how leaders respond and how we as individuals respond, especially in those stressful moments, that really help define the type of individual that we are moving forward.
I love that point. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, you're watching Cyrus Webb Presents. We're joined by Hema Crockett and Michael Crockett. They're the co-authors of this book called The Everyday Leader. For those joining us on the Amazon Live side, and I see you guys there. If you guys have any questions or anything, let me know. We also have the book highlighted there on Amazon, so you guys can be able to just click below to be able to get your own copy of it. I should mention the subtitle of the book, 14 Marine Corps Traits to Unlock Your Leadership DNA. And it goes to what we've been talking about, Michael and Hema, about the correlation between what was learned, but also how it can be applied. Another thing that comes up in this book, and I thought it was really interesting, and it is true that we do normally see this when it comes to anyone in service, I think, and that is their appearance, the way they look, how they choose to carry themselves, how they present themselves, and what they know it says about not only themselves, but the organization that they're a part of. Michael, talk to us about that, and then I'm going to bring you into that, about what you learned about what dress and grooming says about you, and how that is definitely something that needs to find itself in other aspects of life.
So I know from my personal experience, as soon as a new leader checked in, this first thing we're doing is we're looking at that person, either whether it's a male or female, we're looking at how they carry themselves, what their uniform looks like is straight off the top. That's going to tell me if how their attention to detail. Are they confident? Are they going to be really passive? Or are they kind of loose with the regulations, that type of thing? I know as I was a leader and the roles were reversed, I made sure that I went over my uniform for hours to make sure that it was in perfect regulation and that I walked tall, I was very courteous, and I tried to set the positive example for the Marines that I would soon be leading. Because I wouldn't want to get off on the wrong foot, because that first impression you can't get back.
Such a great point, Hema. But before I have you comment on that, I want to read what you all have in the book. It's under bearing on page 120 for those who have the print edition. And this is what you write. Clothes make the man or woman. You may think it doesn't matter what you wear, that people aren't judging your abilities based on how you dress. The truth is, yes, they are. And then you go on to talk about, especially in the world we've been in now since COVID. So talk to us about that, Hema, what you have been able to appreciate yourself and share with others about the importance of those details and what it does say about them.
Yeah, I think holistically, I mean, the point that Mike was talking about in the Marine Corps rings true in our everyday lives as well, right? How we carry ourselves, how put together we are, how we come across says a lot about our commitment to something specific. I think in the time of COVID, for example, I think that's changing a little bit as we talk about remote work, for example. and what people wear on Zoom calls or in meetings. It's still pretty professional, though, from what I've seen. But the way that I think about this is whether you're an individual representing a company or whether you're just an individual, the truth is how you appear is actually your brand and reputation. And I think of it much like your office or your desk. Is it really cluttered? Are there a lot of things on your desk? And people are making meaning of all of those things. And your appearance is actually one of those things. It's not about designer clothing. It's not about jewelry. It's not about any of those things. It is really just about, do you look presentable? Do you look professional in a setting? Is what you're wearing matching kind of the tone or the environment that you're in? And that's just about being cognizant of your surroundings, of who you're speaking to and how you're coming across.
Hema, to that point, you bring up something really interesting, and I want to ask you this, and then Mike, feel free to chime in, because I think there are, especially in the world we live in today, so many people are about thinking about what's right for them, their own personal choice, their own personal style. I don't care what other people think. This is my. And as we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about the everyday leader of today and what it really means to lead. And when you all actually talk about address, now that I'm thinking about it, you address in the book about the importance of awareness and think about others. How important is that for us to remember, yeah, you may have a certain style that you like, but also being aware of the example you're setting?
Yeah, I think self-awareness, and we talked about this a little bit on our last conversation together as well. Self-awareness is really key. Just to how we come across as a leader, how we come across as at work, as a team member, as a significant other, as a friend. And yes, there is a huge piece of this around your own style and what you feel comfortable in and being authentic. And there's also a piece of this which is really around respect. I mean, you wouldn't want to show up at your kid's PTA wearing a crop top and cut off shorts. You wouldn't want to show up at an executive team meeting, just wearing workout clothes necessarily. So I think there's a time and place. And that's not about losing your identity. It is about understanding what your environment and what your circumstances are requiring of you, and maybe including something in that outfit or in that conversation that is authentically you. But that self-awareness piece is actually pretty key, because what we talk about in this book and what we've talked about previously is really around making sure that what you're saying and who you're saying you are as an individual or as a leader is actually being followed through in your actions. And also making sure that if you're saying one thing, that not only are you doing it, but you're also holding others around you to that same standard a little bit as well. And really helping elevate others around you and becoming a coach and a mentor, again, regardless of your level, title, or role within an organization, just as an individual.
Michael, I love what Hema said there, because it brings up another interesting layer to this conversation, because again, the book is the everyday leader. And if we're talking about leaders, that's someone who is setting an example. It's not just about them, it is about those that are with them. How important is that for us as we kind of think about that self-awareness that Hema was talking about, and the way that we look at what we do, realizing it's not just about us, it is about those that we are working with and that are looking to us for that leadership and guidance?
I think personally, that it's imperative that leaders understand that it's not about them. It's not about how you can step on the next person to get to that next promotion so you can get more money. It's not about that. As if you truly are a leader, then you care more about your people, and you get that personal satisfaction from watching them rise through the ranks, so to speak, and be promoted and kind of follow in your image. That's always, for me, that's always been something that brought me a great deal of joy. Is when a Marine, there's like a big deal when a Marine gets promoted, and we call it pinning. And when they ask a leader to pin their chevrons on, that's a big deal for a leader, because that shows that respect. That thank you for teaching me everything, and thank you for helping me get to this point. So that's that unselfishness. I think it's crucial for a leader to have.
Yeah, and I think when you think about it, even on an individual perspective, right? We want to support our friends. We want to be their biggest cheerleaders or their champions. When we talk to them, it's not about, look what I did or look at all of my achievements. It's, what do you need? How can I help you? Let's celebrate each other. So I think that same mentality gets then translated into every relationship in your life.
I want to ask you all a sidebar question, and then I want to talk about courage, which I think is one of the most powerful chapters in the book. Because I think I have a lot of conversations on this platform and others, and one of the things I'm always curious about is about what it's like for someone to feel that void, to be that leader, to step up and be that person who is taking charge. Sometimes we call them a role model in other aspects of life. Hema, has that been an easy role for you to, because of the responsibility that comes with it? Has that been an easy role for you to be able to feel daily?
Not early in my career. I was always scared, right? I was nervous. Was I doing the right thing? Was I saying the right thing? Was I behaving the right way? What are other people going to think? And I think what happened is as time went on, I became less concerned about other people's reactions or if they thought I was doing something right. And once I spent time really being intentional about what type of leader I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up, it became easier. And I would ask for feedback. That was one of the things early on I was pretty scared about. What if somebody said they don't like this or they don't like me? And the truth is, that's okay, right? We're not for everybody. But I will say, asking for feedback, critical or not, was really helpful for me along the journey and how I can take that feedback and become a better leader. But that ties directly with what you were just saying about that chapter you want to discuss on courage. It really is about understanding that if we want to be a leader and if we want to show up as a leader, that it's actually bigger than who we are as individuals. And if we want to do the right thing, we have to put ourselves out there. And as a friend of mine says, put ourselves out there on the skinny branch, right? Where it's scary, where it's uncomfortable, where we're vulnerable, but where we learn the most about ourselves and those around us.
I'm glad you brought up the skinny branch. That's what I was going to talk about. I love that. Michael, I want to ask you a similar question to that because in uniform, of course, I think it's something. For the majority of us, when we see someone in their uniform, I think it's just an obvious thing to show that respect because you know what that means. For you, even outside the uniform, has it been easy for you to embrace that role of being a leader and being able to take the responsibility that comes along with it?
I think in uniform, I almost wore it as a suit of armor. That was so being a leader. There was times where it was very challenging, but outside the Marine Corps, now that I'm retired, I appreciate so much more all the work that the Marine Corps put into me, and it continues to put into all the other Marines that are military that are still on active duty and in the reserves. I definitely appreciate it more, and I am able to reflect on all the leadership lessons that I've learned over the course of my 23 years, and it's easier for me to kind of apply it here and there in the business world where I am now.
In that chapter, courage also on page 144, where it says, "Why is courage in leadership important?" You all write this: "Leadership isn't an invitation only club for people to join. We all have the ability to be great leaders. When you decide you want to be a leader, you start a journey of getting outside of your comfort zone and being uncomfortable. You commit to making decisions. You agree to empower others. You follow your values. All of these things take courage, especially in today's society where many are fearful of losing their jobs if they disagree with the decision or go against the grain, so to speak. There is no rule book for leadership." So, with that being said, then, Michael, since there is no rule book, as people are reading The Everyday Leader, though, what do you hope they take away about how they can be a more effective leader?
I think just having that confidence and trusting your gut and just kind of following your core beliefs. I think if you do that and you're being authentic to yourself and what your core values are, I think everyone has the ability to be a great leader. I think that having those difficult conversations, listen, I've been to combat, I've done all that stuff, and having to have those difficult conversations is equally as hard as going into combat, and it takes just as much courage to do that and to have those conversations with empathy and compassion for that other person. It's extremely difficult, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage.
Hema, what about for you? I mean, since there is no rule book per se, what do you want people to take away from the everyday leader that they can be able to use based on the two of your experiences and what you've learned?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason, first of all, that we say that there's no rule book is because leadership is personal, right? How we show up in the world, the type of individual, the type of leader we want to be is really based on our values, our traits, which is where this book comes in. It's to really show that it doesn't matter, again, what level, role, title, rank in the military you are, that if you start to take some of the principles that exist, some of the traits that exist, and internalize them and personalize them and think about how they relate to you, you can come up with a set of traits that speak to who you are. And what ultimately we hope that people get out of this book is that, again, whatever role they play, they are a leader. And at the end of the book is why we talk about how do you bring all of this together and really write this leadership statement almost that is a picture of who you are as a leader and how you engage with others. So I think it's really important that people get out of this how to make it personal, right? How to get their wheels turning about some traits that are really important to them as a leader. And to really understand that leadership isn't about where you work, that we're leaders in our literally everyday lives, which was why it was so important for us to have this title to the book and to show that you can learn leadership. I mean, there's so many times that we talk about, or that people have talked about, are you born a leader or can you make a leader? And the truth is, we're all leaders. And that's why we called it leadership DNA, because it's all there. It's just about how do we unlock it and how do we bring it to the surface and live our leadership values every day.
It's a great conversation for us to be able to have. I'm so glad I have the two of you here to have it with us. Again, everyone, Hema Crockett and Michael Crockett, the co-authors of the book, The Everyday Leader. You all see it there. The subtitle again is 14 Marine Corps Traits to Unlock Your Leadership DNA. It's available now through our friends at Amazon.com. We have it highlighted there in the carousel for those who are joining us on the Amazon Live side. I see you guys. Appreciate you all over there too on Facebook and YouTube too. So, Michael, I want to throw it to you. How can our audience stay connected with you and keep up with the work you're doing?
So our website is www.gogigtalent.com. And that we're both on that. So that is our website, and absolutely connect with us.
It'll have information on the book as well and some of the work that we're doing too.
Well, Hema, Michael, thank you so much again for another great conversation. It's great to be able to catch up with the two of you, and looking forward to having you back on the program again.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Looking forward to keeping the conversation going, and we do thank you guys for joining us for this episode of Cyrus Webb Presents. If you all did come in late, make sure you guys do get your copy of the book. Again, The Everyday Leader. You all see it there. We have it highlighted on the Amazon Live side. If you guys are catching the replay, all you have to do is look below in the carousel. You can be able to click below, be able to order for yourself. Make sure you guys do add it to your shopping cart, and don't forget to check out. Also below, you will notice the follow button for us here as well on Cyrus Webb Presents. Make sure you guys follow us. We have programming here on Amazon Live 7 days a week, so you guys can stay connected with us and all the great things that we're doing with all of our guests. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, thank you all so much for joining us for Cyrus Webb Presents. We'll see you all soon. Take care.